thought he was sleeping until he pulled me closer, and suddenly everything felt like it was moving in slow motion. I'm pretty sure my heart skipped a beat, maybe two. You ever have one of those moments where you freeze, caught somewhere between what's happening and don't screw this up? Yeah, that was me lying there next to Jamie on my tiny apartment couch, the dim glow from the streetlights outside painting stripes across his face. We'd been hanging out for a while now, way longer than I expected when we first met. I mean, I wasn't even looking for anything serious, just two guys trying to figure things out without the usual awkwardness of first dates or the "what do you want from this" conversations. Jamie made that easy. He's the kind of guy who laughs quietly, like he's always holding back a joke, and has these eyes that make you feel like you're the only person in the room without even trying. That night, we just finished watching some dumb comedy on Netflix. I was sprawled out on the couch, feet kicked up, half paying attention while scrolling on my phone. Jamie was lying beside me, his head on my shoulder, breathing steady. I figured he was out cold because his eyes were closed and his chest rose and fell so evenly. I was about to get up when I felt his hand inch toward mine, and then, all of a sudden, he pulled me closer like he didn't want to let go. It hit me out of nowhere. I wasn't sure if he'd meant to do it, or if it was some sleepy reflex, but it definitely felt deliberate. And all of a sudden, the easy, casual vibe between us got this electric charge that made my stomach flip. The room seemed smaller, warmer, like the world had shrunk down to just the two of us on that threadbare couch, with the peeling paint on the walls behind us. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words got stuck. So I just stayed there, letting him pull me in, feeling way more nervous than I should have been. I wasn't sure if this was a beginning or just some random late-night weirdness. But either way, I couldn't stop thinking about how close he was, how soft his breath sounded, and what it might mean. That was how it all started, and honestly, I had no clue it was going to change everything. I still remember how quiet the room felt after he pulled me closer like that. It wasn't one of those awkward silences either. It was more like everything slowed down, and for the first time in a long while, I wasn't worried about what to say next or how to act. I just focused on the way Jamie's hand fit perfectly in mine, like they'd been made for each other. I glanced down at him, half expecting him to open his eyes, maybe laugh it off or say something cheesy like, "Sorry, I didn't mean to drag you in." But no, he stayed there with his eyes closed, breathing steady, his eyelashes casting tiny shadows on his cheeks. I think I was holding my breath, just waiting for whatever was going to happen next. Finally, I whispered, "Hey, you awake?" A little smile tugged at the corner of his lips, and he opened one eye, then the other. "Yeah." Just didn't want to let go. I felt this stupid grin spreading across my face. Me neither. We stayed like that for a bit longer, just holding hands and listening to the quiet hum of the city outside. It was the kind of moment you don't expect, but never want to forget. Eventually, I shifted a bit so I could look at him better. His hair was tousled like he'd run his fingers through it all day, and the soft light caught the curve of his jaw, making him look kind of like a sculpture. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me, his eyes searching mine like he was trying to figure me out. "Because I wasn't sure you felt the same. I didn't want to mess up what we have. We'd never really put a label on things, but it was clear there was something there, something more than just friends hanging out." And hearing him say that made my chest tighten in a way that was both scary and exciting. "I feel the same," I said, squeezing his hand. "More than the same, probably." He smiled again, this time fully awake and definitely teasing. "You're such a dork." We laughed softly, the kind of easy, familiar laugh that comes after you break through some invisible wall. Then, as if nervous he'd talked too much, he shifted away a little, but I caught his wrist and pulled him back. "Don't," I said, voice firmer than I expected. He froze for a second, then leaned in closer. We were inches apart now, and I could smell the faint scent of his cologne mixed with something warmer, like the way he smelled after a long day, a little tired but still good enough to make me want to just sit there forever. "What if we try this?" he whispered. "See where it goes?" "Yeah," I said, not even hesitating. "Let's see." That was the moment that changed things. Not some grand declaration or dramatic kiss, but two guys sitting on a worn-out couch, finally admitting that maybe, just maybe, they wanted more. Over the next few days, everything felt kind of new and fragile, like we were both tiptoeing around this new territory, trying not to mess it up, but also hoping we'd find a way to make it work. We started texting more, like actual conversations, not just the usual, "What's up?" or "You around?" We talked about dumb stuff, like music and movies, but also about what we wanted out of life, which is kind of terrifying when you think about it, but also amazing. One night, a couple of days after that couch moment, Jamie invited me over to his place. It was a small apartment too, but totally different vibe. Cleaner, brighter, with a tiny kitchen that smelled like fresh coffee and something sweet baking in the oven. He had this old record player in the corner, playing some indie tunes that I didn't recognize but liked instantly. We cooked together, or more like, he cooked, and I tried not to burn the garlic bread. There was a lot of joking and pretending to be chefs, and at one point, I caught him watching me like I was the only thing in the room again. It made me nervous in the best way. After dinner, we moved to his couch, which was way comfier than mine. He put on a movie, but neither of us really watched it. Instead, we ended up talking about our families, stuff I hadn't really shared with many people before. Jamie's parents were pretty chill, he said, but he'd had his fair share of awkward coming-out conversations. I told him about mine, how they took it better than I expected, but still struggled with some things. It felt good to open up, and even better to have someone there who got it without judging or trying to fix it. I think that's when I started realizing this was more than just a crush or some late-night thing. I actually wanted to be with Jamie, wherever that might lead. At some point, the movie ended, and the apartment got quiet except for the occasional noise from the hallway. Jamie reached out again, his hand finding mine like it was second nature. I didn't pull away this time. "Do you want to stay the night?" he asked, voice low and kind of hopeful. My heart did that weird flip again. "Yeah, I want to." So I stayed. And lying there next to him, in the dark, with his hand still holding mine, I realized I'd never felt this comfortable with anyone. Not just physically close, but emotionally too. I don't know what the future holds or where this will go, but right then, it felt like the start of something real. Something worth holding on to. And honestly, I wouldn't trade that moment for anything. Morning came slower than I expected. I woke up tangled in the blankets, Jamie's arm draped loosely over my waist, his breath warm against my neck. For a second, I just lay there, trying not to move and risk breaking whatever fragile peace that had settled between us overnight. I turned my head slowly and caught his face in the soft morning light. His eyes were still closed, eyelashes resting lightly on his cheeks, and his lips looked like they'd been begging for a kiss. It was weird, this feeling, like I was seeing him differently now, not just as the guy I first hung out with or the friend who made me laugh, but someone who mattered in a way that went deeper than I'd ever let myself feel before. I wanted to wake him, but I didn't want to shatter the quiet magic of the moment either, so I just stayed there, tracing lazy circles on his arm, trying to memorize the way his skin felt under my fingers. Eventually, Jamie stirred, blinking open his eyes and smiling that sleepy, slightly mischievous smile. "Morning," he mumbled, voice still rough from sleep. "Morning," I whispered back, trying to keep my voice steady even though my heart was hammering like I'd just run a marathon. He shifted closer, nudging his nose against mine. "You're warm. That's probably a good thing," I joked, though I was pretty sure it was just his presence making me feel like the room was 10 degrees hotter. We stayed like that for a while. No rush, no plans. Just two people figuring out how to share space in a way that felt easy and right. And for once, I wasn't thinking about the next text or the next hangout or what this all meant. I was just there. Later that day, we decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. It was early spring, the kind of day where the sun feels like a promise that better things are coming, even if you're stuck in the middle of a city that never really sleeps. Jamie held my hand as we strolled past coffee shops and little bookstores, the kind of places that seem to have stories of their own hidden in the window displays. We ended up at this tiny park with a few benches and a view of the skyline poking through the trees. We sat down, and for the first time, I let myself ask the question that had been buzzing around my mind since that night on the couch. "Do you think we're doing this?" I said, fiddling with the sleeve of my jacket. Jamie looked at me, thoughtful. "Doing what?" "This," I said, gesturing vaguely between us. "Whatever this is. Something more than just hanging out." He smiled, that same smile that made everything feel less complicated. "I think we are. I just didn't want to rush it or mess it up." "I didn't either," I admitted. "But I want to try, for real." There was a beat of silence before he squeezed my hand. "Me too." I felt a weird mix of relief and excitement. It was like stepping off a cliff but knowing there was a net below, even if you couldn't see it yet. Over the next few weeks, things settled into a rhythm that felt natural, but still new and exciting. We went out for dinner more, tried cooking together, which was mostly me burning things and Jamie laughing at me, and discovered that we both had this terrible habit of quoting movies at random moments. I learned he was obsessed with hiking even though he wasn't exactly in shape for it, and he found out I had a weird thing for old sci-fi novels. But it wasn't just the fun stuff. We started having more serious conversations too, like what we wanted out of life, where we saw ourselves in a few years, and how we dealt with the stuff we didn't talk about much, like family, fears, and the stuff that makes you vulnerable. One night, after a late dinner at his place, we found ourselves sitting on the floor by the window, watching the city lights blink on one by one. I don't know why, but I felt brave enough to ask something I'd been scared to say. "Have you told your family about me?" He shrugged, looking out at the skyline. "A little. My sister knows. My parents, not really." "You?" "Same," I said. "My dad's been okay with it, but my mom's still figuring it out." It was weird talking about it out loud instead of just thinking about it, but it felt good to know we were both navigating the same messy, complicated stuff. Jamie turned to me then, eyes serious but soft. "I'm glad it's you." I blinked, surprised. "What?" He smiled, a little shy now. "I mean, I'm glad we found each other. It's scary putting yourself out there, but with you, it just feels right." I didn't know what to say, so I just leaned in and kissed him, a slow, easy kiss that felt like coming home. After that, things didn't suddenly get perfect or anything. We had our awkward moments, like when I accidentally said something dumb about his cooking, or when he forgot to text back for a day, and I panicked way more than I should have. But there was this constant underneath it all, a feeling that we were in it together, figuring things out one step at a time. One weekend, we took a day trip to the beach. It was chilly, but the sun was out, and the air smelled like salt and possibility. We walked along the shore, our shoes in hand, the waves crashing around our ankles. Jamie grabbed my hand and pulled me close again, that same instinctive move that had started it all. "Remember that night on your couch?" he asked, grinning. I laughed. How could I forget? "Yeah, me neither. I think that was the moment everything changed." "Definitely," I said, squeezing his hand. "And maybe that's the weird, messy, beautiful part of it all, the way something small and unexpected can turn into everything. I'm still figuring it out, still learning how to be with someone in a way that feels honest and real. But Jamie, he makes it feel possible. Like maybe this is where I'm supposed to be." After that day at the beach, things felt like they were settling into a comfortable groove. Not boring, but the kind of steady that makes you think, okay, this could last. We weren't rushing, but we were definitely moving forward, which was a relief because, honestly, I'd been burned before by people who'd bolt the second things got real. One Friday evening, Jamie texted me around 7, asking if I wanted to come over for dinner. He'd been talking about making his famous spaghetti carbonara for weeks, and I was curious if it actually lived up to the hype. I showed up 20 minutes later, juggling a bottle of wine and trying not to trip over the threshold of his apartment. He greeted me with that grin that always made me feel like maybe I'd won some secret lottery. "Hey, you made it," he said, pulling me in for a quick hug. "Ready for some chef-level pasta?" "Absolutely," I said, grinning. Though I'm pretty sure I'm just here for moral support. We settled into the kitchen, where Jamie was already halfway through chopping garlic and tossing bacon in a pan. The smell was insane. I tried to help, but mostly ended up being the official taste tester, which honestly is a pretty sweet gig. While he was cooking, we talked about everything and nothing, work, dumb office stories, and some bad jokes Jamie insisted were classics. I was halfway through a tale about my coworker accidentally sending a meme to the entire department when Jamie reached for my hand. "Hey," he said softly, eyes catching mine across the counter. "You okay?" I stopped mid-sentence, a little caught off guard. "Yeah, just distracted, I guess." He frowned slightly, like he didn't quite buy it. "Want to talk about it?" I hesitated. It wasn't easy to admit when things were bothering me, especially when I was trying to keep this momentum going. But something about the way he looked at me made me want to be honest. "It's nothing huge," I started, "but sometimes I get nervous. Like, what if this doesn't last? What if I mess it up?" Jamie nodded, his expression serious but kind. "I get that. I worry about that too." I was surprised. It felt good to hear that he wasn't just pretending everything was perfect. "So, what do you do when you're scared?" He smiled a little. "I hold on tighter. To the people who matter." I swallowed, feeling something warm spread through my chest. "Yeah, me too." After dinner, we moved to the couch, wine glasses in hand. The city lights twinkled through the window, and there was a quiet comfort in the way we fit together without needing to say much. Then Jamie leaned back, turning to face me more fully. "You ever think about the future? Like, what you want 5 years from now?" I thought about it, tracing a finger along the rim of my glass. "I'm not great at planning that far ahead, but I want someone to share it with. Someone who gets me." He nodded slowly. "Same here. I guess I was lucky to find you." I felt my cheeks heat up. "I was lucky you pulled me closer that night." He laughed softly. "Yeah, I wasn't totally asleep after all." We fell into an easy silence, the kind that feels like a promise rather than an absence of words. Then, out of nowhere, Jamie reached over and brushed a stray hair from my forehead. "I'm really glad you're here," he said quietly. I smiled, my heart pounding. "Me too." That night, when I left his apartment, it felt different. Like somewhere along the way, we'd crossed some invisible line, not necessarily into something defined or labeled, but into a space where we both knew this was real. Messy and imperfect and sometimes scary, but real. Over the next couple of weeks, we started introducing each other to friends, which was a big deal for me. My closest buddies were nothing but supportive, cracking jokes and giving Jamie the usual ribbing that comes from meeting a new guy in the circle. Jamie's friends were just as welcoming, which made me realize how much I wanted him to be a bigger part of my world. One night, after a group dinner, Jamie and I ended up walking me back to my place. The city was buzzing with late-night energy, but between us, everything felt calm. "Thanks for tonight," I said, slipping my hands into my pockets. He smiled, eyes glowing in the streetlight. "Anytime. You make it easy." We stood there for a beat, and then Jamie did that thing again. He pulled me closer, resting his forehead against mine. It was small, but it sent this electric buzz through me. "I'm really into you?" he said, voice low but steady. I laughed softly, feeling a grin spread on my face. "I'm really into you too." That night marked another shift. We started making small plans for the future, a weekend getaway, maybe a concert, stuff that felt exciting because it was tentative, but hopeful. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. One evening, after a long day at work, I caught Jamie texting someone late into the night. When I asked, he brushed it off like it was nothing, but I could tell something was off. "Hey, you good?" I asked quietly. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face. Then he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know," he admitted. "There's some stuff I haven't told you yet." That caught me off guard. "What kind of stuff?" Jamie hesitated, then said, "Family stuff. It's complicated." We sat in silence for a bit, the weight of unspoken things hanging between us. But this time, I didn't pull away. "Whenever you're ready," I said. "I'm here." He smiled, a little vulnerable, but grateful. "Thanks. That means a lot." And just like that, I realized that this, us, wasn't just about the easy parts. It was about sticking around when things got complicated, being patient with each other's messy histories. That was the real test. I don't know what's next for Jamie and me, but I do know that moment, when he pulled me closer that first night, was the start of something that's already changed my life in ways I'm still figuring out. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. The next few days after Jamie's confession about the family stuff were complicated, to say the least. Not in a bad way, but in that awkward, how do we even start this conversation kind of way. We kept texting like usual, but there was this new edge, like both of us were waiting for the other to say something that might change the game. Finally, one evening, I decided to just ask him straight up. We were sitting on his couch, the kind of comfortable mess that felt like home now, watching some random documentary that neither of us was really paying attention to. "Jamie," I said, turning to face him, "you want to talk about what you meant? About your family?" He paused the show and looked at me, eyes a little tired, but honest. "Yeah, I think I'm ready." He took a deep breath and started. "My parents, they're not exactly the most open-minded people. I came out a couple of years ago, and it didn't go great. They love me, but they don't really understand. There's a lot of silence and half-finished conversations. It's like they're trying, but it still hurts sometimes." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "That sounds rough." "It is," he admitted, "but I've learned to handle it, mostly. I just didn't want that to be a thing between us. I wanted to wait until I felt stronger about it." I reached out and took his hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Thank you for telling me. I'm here, okay? Whatever comes." He smiled, this genuine, relieved smile like a weight had lifted. "I know, and that means everything." That night felt like a turning point. Not because something big happened, but because we both opened up in a way that made me realize how much trust was building between us. A few weeks later, I found myself at a family dinner Jamie had invited me to. His sister was there, warm and welcoming, and his parents, well, they were quieter than I expected, but polite. I caught Jamie's eye a few times, and the way he smiled at me said everything. Even if his parents weren't ready to say it out loud, this was a step. Dinner was filled with small talk, jokes, and the kind of awkward silences you get when new people meet. But all in all, it was good. Real good. Walking home afterward, Jamie and I held hands like it was the most natural thing in the world. "So," I said, "how'd I do?" He laughed. "Better than I thought." We stopped at a little corner where the streetlights flickered, and I pulled him close. "I'm proud of you," I said quietly. He looked up at me, eyes shining. "Thanks for being patient. Always," I promised. As the months went on, our relationship grew in ways I never expected. We celebrated birthdays, took weekend trips, and started sharing parts of ourselves that we'd kept hidden before. There were still tough conversations, moments of doubt, and times when life felt overwhelming, but we faced it together. One night after a long day, Jamie surprised me by cooking dinner. Real dinner, not his usual semi-experimentation. We ate by candlelight in his living room, talking about everything and nothing. "I've been thinking," he said between bites, "about what comes next." I raised an eyebrow. "Like what? Another cooking adventure?" He laughed. "No, I mean us. The future." I felt my heart skip. "Okay, I'm listening." He reached across the table, taking my hand again. "I don't have it all figured out, but I want you in it. For the long haul." I squeezed his hand, warmth spreading through me. "I want that too." We didn't say much after that, but the silence wasn't empty. It was full of possibility. Looking back, it all started with that simple pull, him pulling me closer when I thought he was asleep. A small gesture that opened the door to something I never saw coming, but now can't imagine living without. Sometimes, love sneaks up on you in the quiet moments, the ones that don't make sense at first but end up meaning everything. And honestly, I'm grateful every day that Jamie decided not to let go. A couple of weeks after that quiet dinner, life threw us that weird curveball that no one ever really talks about until they live through it themselves. Jamie got a call from his dad. His parents were splitting up. Not a messy, explosive breakup, but the kind where years of silence and unresolved stuff finally catch up and make itself known. His dad was moving out of the house, and Jamie was the one stuck in the middle, trying to figure out how to hold on to whatever thread of family was left. I remember that night clearly. We were at his apartment, sitting across from each other on the couch. Jamie had that faraway stare, the one where you know his mind is rushing through a million things, but his lips were tight, refusing to let anything slip out. I didn't say anything for a while, I just reached out and took his hand because sometimes words aren't what you need. Want to talk about it? I finally asked, keeping my voice soft. He shrugged, then shook his head. I don't even know where to start. It feels like the ground's shifting under me, and I'm trying not to fall. I pulled him closer until he was almost leaning into me, his head resting on my shoulder. You don't have to have it figured out right now. I'm here. He let out a shaky breath and whispered, "Thank you." That night stretched on, filled with quiet moments and the occasional broken sentence that didn't quite capture how heavy things felt. But it was real. It was raw. And for all the chaos, I felt lucky to be the person he wanted to lean on. In the weeks that followed, things got complicated. Jamie's parents were civil but distant. Family dinners became tense, and I could see Jamie holding back pieces of himself to keep the peace. It wasn't easy watching someone you care about struggle, especially when you wanted to fix things but knew you couldn't. One Saturday afternoon, we took a walk through the park near my place. The trees were just starting to bud, and the air had that fresh, hopeful smell of spring. Jamie was quiet for a long time, then finally said, "I've been thinking about moving out of the house. It feels like the right time, you know?" I nodded. "If that's what you want, I'm behind you." He looked at me, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "It's scary. I've lived there my whole life. But I need a fresh start." "Then let's find you a place that feels like yours," I said, grinning. "And if you want, I can help." He smiled, the kind of genuine smile that lights up his whole face. "I'd like that." Starting to look for apartments together was this weird mix of exciting and nerve-wracking. We checked out tiny studios, bigger places with balconies, and even one that had a weird smell but a killer view. Every time we toured a new spot, I could see the wheels turning in Jamie's head, trying to imagine if it could be more than just a space, but a home. One evening, after a particularly long day of apartment hunting, we ended up back at his place, exhausted and ready to just crash. Jamie flopped onto the couch, and I sat down beside him, letting my head rest on his shoulder. "You know," he said, "I never thought I'd be excited about moving. But with you, it feels different. Like maybe this is the start of something new for both of us." I looked up at him, feeling this rush of warmth. I like the sound of that. New beginnings. The next week, Jamie found a small but cozy apartment just a few blocks from me. It had this little balcony that overlooked a quiet street and just enough room for the two of us to crash comfortably. We spent the day moving boxes, unpacking, and trying to figure out where everything should go. When we finally sat down in the empty living room, surrounded by half-open boxes and takeout containers, Jamie looked over at me and said, "Thanks for being here. I don't think I could have done this alone." I smiled, feeling my chest swell. "You're not alone." "Not now, not ever." That night, as we lay tangled together in his new bed, I realized how far we'd come. From a random pull on the couch to sharing this space, this life in progress. It wasn't perfect. There were still uncertainties and fears, but it was ours. A few days later, Jamie invited me out for dinner at this little Italian place he'd discovered. Over bowls of pasta and glasses of red wine, he reached across the table and took my hand. "I've been thinking," he said, voice a little nervous but steady, "about how lucky I am to have you." I squeezed his hand, feeling that familiar flutter in my stomach. "I'm the lucky one," he smiled, eyes sparkling. "So what do you say we keep building this? Together." I leaned in, resting my forehead against his. I wouldn't want it any other way. It's funny how a simple gesture, like pulling me closer that night, can set off a chain reaction that changes everything. Now, whenever I think about that moment, I realize it wasn't just about closeness. It was about trust, hope, and the beginning of something real. And honestly, I'm ready to see where this takes us. Months passed since Jamie moved into his new place, and with every day, the line between us and me blurred in the best way. We settled into routines, lazy Sunday mornings making coffee together, debates over what playlist to put on, and those quiet nights when words felt unnecessary because being close said enough. One evening, we were sitting on that little balcony of his apartment, the city humming softly below us. The air was cool, just enough to make the warmth of Jamie's hand in mine feel like a tether to something steady. We didn't talk much. Sometimes the best moments are the ones shared in silence. Then he looked over at me, eyes reflecting the glow of the streetlights. You know, I never thought I'd find this. Someone who gets me, who sticks around when things get messy. I smiled, feeling that familiar warmth in my chest. Me neither. I was scared, honestly, but you made it feel possible. He squeezed my hand gently. I'm glad I pulled you closer that night. I chuckled softly. Yeah, that was kind of the best move you ever made. We laughed, but beneath it was something deeper. A quiet acknowledgement of how far we'd come. From uncertain beginnings to this steady, comforting presence that felt like home. Later, as we headed inside, Jamie paused and turned to me. I don't know what the future holds exactly, but I want to keep figuring it out with you. I nodded, feeling tears prick the corners of my eyes, not from sadness, but from this overwhelming sense of rightness. That sounds perfect. We stood there for a moment, holding on to each other without needing grand gestures or promises. Because sometimes, love isn't about fireworks or dramatic declarations. It's about the small, steady moments that build something real. And in that quiet apartment, with the city lights twinkling outside, I knew I'd found something worth holding on to. Something that started with a simple pull and grew into a partnership built on trust, patience, and genuine care. So yeah, I guess what I'm saying is, sometimes all it takes is one unexpected moment to change everything. And when you find the right person to hold on to, that moment becomes the start of a whole new story. And honestly, I'm looking forward to every page.